Hello and welcome to One Called Mama. I am your host, Sam, and I am so thankful that you decided to join us today. So, today is a very exciting episode for me because I get to interview someone I've known for a while and actually used to go to church with. And she is inspiring. She is such a joy. She has the reason she's on today is because she started her own company, her own business, and I absolutely love it. And I love seeing what she puts out there on social media. It's positive, it's vulnerable, it's everything that everyone needs to hear. So I thought it would be amazing to bring her on today, and she graciously accepted. So everyone, please welcome Sierra Byers. Sierra, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
I am doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for showing up. So, before we jump into today and learn all about you and what you're doing,
Mm.
I would love to just for you to just share a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, any fun facts about you, those kinds of things.
Sure. So again, my name is Sierra. I am 27 and I live here in the cute little town in Waxahachie, Texas. My husband Evan and I just bought our first historic home. It's our first home, but
So
it's
exciting.
100 years old.
Wow, that's so cool.
Last- yeah, last November. Um, and interesting facts. These are the things that always you're like, man, am I interesting? Interesting facts. I am a licensed cosmetologist. I've been
Awesome.
a licensed cosmetologist for over 10 years. I have a dog that I am stereotypically obsessed with. And I really hate summer, which is unfortunate living in Texas.
Oh, girl, I feel you on that. Oh, I
Yeah.
feel you on that so hard. Oh,
Yeah.
man, I'm dreading the summer.
I went to the grocery store this morning and I was like, let me do it at 8 a.m. And
Mhm.
I was still sweating,
Yep.
getting to the car, unloading groceries. And I was like, ah, it is officially summer
It
in
is,
Texas.
yeah, it's officially summer. I ever since having kids, like I have no tolerance, none whatsoever. I just can't I can't handle the heat. I hate it so much.
No.
So I am going to jump right in with some questions for you, and I really just want to start out. Explain a little bit about your company and what what is at the heart of it, and what kind of products are have you put out there so far?
Sure. So Evan and I launched our company in January 2022. And the previous October, I had quit my job. What I was doing at the time is I was a registered behavioral tech. And so I worked with kids on the spectrum with doing functional therapy just so they can participate in life in a easier way, and giving them just the tools to go to school, communicate. And I really respect anyone that can do that job long term.
Yeah.
It was very draining. And we had booked a trip to Oregon, which was
Mm.
supposed to be our honeymoon trip. But we got married in the year of our Lord, 2020. So that whole original honeymoon did not happen. And so we ended up taking the trip a few years later. And it was just the first time that I feel like I had the bandwidth to be creative again, just because my job just kind of took everything out of me.
Yeah.
And I've always loved community and I've always had a heart for women. Um,
Yeah.
and some of the health issues that I was experiencing as far as hormone disruption, and we were experiencing infertility and all of these things, um, I had a passion for talking about. And it was kind of hard to put a ribbon around, okay, here are all these subjects that I feel like I have some knowledge in or a passion about, but how do I combine all of those things?
Yeah.
And whenever we were on the plane ride back, it was just kind of that impending doom of like, I know I'm having to go back to work on Monday. I miss feeling like a whole person, and just being able to access those more creative sides of myself. And I was just anxiously praying on the plane because I was like, gosh, like I know that the Lord has provided this job and it is a good job, but like I just know that this is not like my ultimate like life calling. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And yeah, so just a desperate prayer on an airplane. And at that point, I started writing in my notes just like different ideas that I had, different things that I could do, different passions I had. And I ended up coming up, I say I ended up, I know it was not me because I came up with, or I wrote down all of the products that we currently have, products
Wow.
that we intend to have, ideas for networking, a brick and mortar, just all of these different things just kind of all flooded my phone screen through my fingers. um, and my husband is an engineer. And so I am the dreamer, creative,
Mhm.
let's paint everything all the colors. And he's like my math person, Excel spreadsheet. Okay, well, let's sit down and think about this before, we go buy a dairy cow when we live in a residential neighborhood. And and I love that about him.
Yeah.
And so he had his headphones in. I tugged on his shirt and I was like, "Hey, I like have this idea and I think it's kind of significant because all of this just came to me
Mm.
in this moment." And that was indicative to me that that was not me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like that was
Yeah.
definitely a God moment for me. And I kind of expected him to, kind of brush it off or even shut it down or have just some critical questions and things that I didn't think about. And he was just like, he read it all and asked me, how did I think of all that? And I said, I didn't, but I'm going to take that as a compliment. And that week, I put in my 2 weeks. We
Wow.
started talking to just a few of our friends that did like vendor markets and did small businesses in that way. Um, I have a few connections just through family that
Mhm.
my father in law has worked at a bank for years doing business consulting. And so he gave us some other perspectives. And so the business itself was kind of born spontaneously out of a mix of, desperately wanting to figure out how to combine all the things that I love and that I know that I'm passionate about, um, and
Yeah.
making something to give back to a community.
Yeah.
And whenever you kind of have the rose colored glasses taken off and you can see, oh man, like everybody has a chronic illness or they're sick in some way or food allergy or whatever. Um, and then you kind of see the industry and, um, all of the drug companies and food companies and just kind of everything for what it is. And all they're about is the bottom dollar, their
Yeah.
bottom line. Um, it can be it's disenchanting, but then
Mhm.
it's also overwhelming to feel like you have to navigate that alone.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so I knew just with all of my kind of background with the beauty industry and then my passion with kind of the holistic health world, um, just different things that people have been doing since like the dawn of time.
Mhm.
And some people will say it's weird to use beef fat on your face, and you're like, well, is that really that weird, or is it weird to put petroleum on your face? You know,
Yeah,
so
because I mean, once you try the beef fat, it's kind of like,
right,
wow, this is
right,
amazing.
right. But I understand how, I mean, whenever I first heard about it, I was like, that is a level of crunchy I will never attain to. And here we are. But the products that we have, I manufacture all of them, and they're
Wow.
all organic, third party tested. All the ingredients are, and then I feel like I try to combine just oils and fats and butters that people have been using across cultures and continents for centuries, and then I'm essential oil sensitive, and so I don't use those. So what I actually do is I use like the whole herb, the whole
Mhm.
plant, and I have a little home apothecary set up, and
Cool.
that's what we do.
That's
Um,
so cool.
yeah,
That's so cool. And I wanna talk about the essential oil sensitive in a minute. But I want to jump back to you when you said, because I have a feeling everyone's gonna think this too. You said you came home and you put in your 2 weeks notice.
Yes.
So So let's walk through that a little bit
Great.
because that sounds so easy. It's like, yeah, I just turned in my 2 weeks notice. No, no, that has an impact somewhere,
Yeah.
somehow. I mean,
Yeah.
jumping from a consistent good job that yes is
Mhm.
draining, and I think a lot of people can identify with having a job that's draining. But let's walk through what that looked like and how you process that. And did you feel like God said do that, or was it just a like I don't feel like you would go against God. Let me phrase this better. But did you feel like the Lord was saying, just go for it, just go ahead because that's a big deal.
Yeah. I will say that I am not advocating for everyone to do that. Um, but whenever all of these ideas and products and recipes and everything just kind of fell into my lap, I did come home, and I think there's maybe like a week in between, where like instead of coming home and like immediately crashing and going to bed, like I would get on Canva and I would try to design things. And
Yeah.
um, I've always done kind of my own business thing, whether that was doing like I was a hair and makeup artist for a long time. I did lash extensions for a long time. I ran my own suite for a long time. And so I've always had that multi passionate entrepreneurial
Mhm.
type of spirit. And I think, coming back from vacation a little bit rejuvenated, I was like, oh my gosh, here's that part of my personality that has otherwise been dead since I started this job.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely an ongoing conversation that week between my husband and I. Um, but he also has a really good job, and we're frugal people, generally speaking. And
Yeah.
so we sacrificed probably about $6,000 and my income. And we said we're going to give it like 6 months and just kind of, we're young, we don't have children yet. And at that point, we were living in an apartment. And so it was kind of like, if we're going to do it, this is a safe time for us to kind of, if we're going to lose $6,000 to $10,000, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
But you and I, as two adults, can manage. And so between kind of having the logical or the logistical things kind of work out in our favor, the timing felt right, and I knew that this was just something that I could not just let go of.
Yeah.
I would go to sleep thinking about it. I would dream about it. I would wake up thinking about it. I would think about it while I'm trying to do my job, which is, not the greatest thing, but I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And, I always, before we do anything different, whether that's like buying a house or a car or just making any sort of big move that would impact us significantly financially, is okay, is God, like, is this something that we have your blessing to do, that you want us to do, that, and
Right.
if it's not, make me forget about it, like take the desire away from me, pull it from my brain so I don't obsess about it.
Yeah.
And I prayed that continually for that week. We evaluated just kind of our financials. And um, yeah, like it was definitely kind of a risky move in the sense of, yeah, I mean, we invested some money.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, I felt peace about it. And again, with my husband being just kind of the more logical person, he was like, okay, this is a little scary, but I guess if we're ever going to do this, now would be the time. And I think our lives are better for it. Um, Even though, our savings account does not look like how it did whenever
Mhm.
I had a full-time job that I could get overtime and time and a half on. And
Yeah.
um, our lives are richer in other ways.
Yeah.
And the community that we've been able to build, for even for ourselves personally, but then providing an avenue for community to be made for others, is
Mhm.
1,000 times worth it. So
Yeah, Absolutely. Let's have a huge shout out for the husbands out there who support the ambitious,
Yes.
dreaming wives who have these callings on their heart to do something that's scary and doesn't make sense. And I know, like, when you're in the Christian community long enough, when you're a Christian, you hear the phrase, sometimes God will ask you to do something that doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
And that's totally what he did. And so, you follow it, and it's scary. And yeah, it feels better when your bank account is full. It feels better when you have those two incomes coming in and you feel like you're seeing the security. And yet, it's such a good reminder that that money is not our security, because God is our security. God is our provider, not the money. So
Right.
that's so good. And shout out to Evan, and shout out to my husband for for allowing us to do the crazy things that we feel like God leads us to do. And
Mhm.
that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right. So you started the business. How did it look like starting out? Because I know, like, for the women out there listening, it's kind of like, okay, well, now what? Like, okay, I've got this vision.
Yeah.
I've got, like, the support of my husband or my spouse, or maybe they don't have a spouse, maybe they're just doing this on their own. But they're like, okay, I can do this logically. I can financially afford it right now. I can do it. But now what? Like, what do you do with it? Like, what was the first step for you, and how did you really build? Because it is a process.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously it's going to be a little bit different, just kind of depending on the business. But for
Absolutely.
us, we are primarily an online retailer. So we have products. And so naturally, the next step of, okay, well, we're going to do this is recipe formulation and then branding.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like branding you could do as your like your first initial step with pretty much anything. What is your name? What's it mean? And then even before you kind of put pen to paper and logos and everything, um, it sounds so cliche, but like knowing your why, like
Yeah.
why do you do what you do? Like why is this important? If you're offering a service or trying to sell product, like what need are you trying to fulfill for your customer base? Why should they choose your products? What makes you special in comparison to
Yeah.
the thing at Target? Um, because where I was like, oh my gosh, my friends will just want to support me. And that's true. That is so true. Um, but no matter how many jars of tallow my mom buys, it's not going to pay my bills.
That's right.
And so just being realistic and honest with yourself, because there's people that have great ideas and that have great businesses, um, and like the amount of people that I've seen on Etsy that have wonderful niche quality products,
Right.
but you kind of lose the edge in the marketing and the branding. And so
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that I did after we were like, okay, well we're gonna do this. I talked to one of our friends who's a graphic designer, has built a lot of websites. Kind of got some input from her. She helped do my logo. Um, and then it was like, okay, now I kind of have like the brand colors and the fonts and all of these things. So now let me play with it to make labels, to make
Mm-hmm.
inserts, to try to start social media things. And um, that was kind of the initial, like, doing admin work like that and doing the legwork for just making things aesthetically pleasing, as shallow as that kind of sounds.
Mm.
It's what draws
It's
people's
so
attention.
important. It's so important.
Uh, so that was definitely the first thing. Now, for my husband, the first thing was setting up an Excel spreadsheet to track what we were spending, how much we were spending, how much one product cost us to make, how much an individual jar was, how much did one sticker cost, all of these things to where I can get lost in the weeds with
Mm-hmm.
those things and be like, well, $20 seems fine. Yeah, that sounds good. And he's
Yeah.
like, seriously, if you sell it for $20, you're only making like three. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's why this is your job. Make
So
things pretty. Um, I'll make the products. You can just handle the financial parts.
there you go.
Um, And I feel very grateful that he's able to do that. But if this is for someone who is doing this endeavor like all by herself, even getting a app like QuickBooks is
Hmm.
super helpful. Um, QuickBooks and then Square is kind of like the retailer platform
Yeah.
that everybody knows. But they have some good like widgets, I guess you would call them, just some supportive softwares that keeping track of everything just from the jump, how much you're spending, how much you're
Yeah.
bringing in. Um, because it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm going to do this business as like a cute side hobby. It's a whole other thing to say, I need to make this product scalable because
Hmm.
eventually I'd like it to retire me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
Yeah. And that's a great goal. I love that you just said that. There is such a
yeah.
difference between a hobby and a passion project
Mm-hmm.
and an actual life-changing investment that you're making. It's still a passion project.
Right.
Your heart is 100% in this. I know that.
Mhm.
But you are going somewhere with it and you are being very intentional, and that is
Right.
huge. And I'm
Yeah.
also hearing that you do have to have, I love that you said it, that Evan is the logical business side, and you are the creative, like product making side. And that's
Mhm.
perfect. That's the way it should be. And that's probably why y'all are so good for each
Yeah.
other. And people who are doing this on their own, they do have to have, either resources for both, or they have to be willing to stretch themselves in the
Mhm.
beginning because they're probably not going to be able to afford leverage.
Right.
So having the ability or the spreadsheets or the tools necessary to
Mhm.
do that. And I love that you said Square and QuickBooks. Is there
Yes.
like a free version of QuickBooks that people can use?
There is, and there's definitely a like if you're trying if this is like your first endeavor and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Um, my encouragement for people, especially if you're going, hey, this is something I love. It's kind of a hobby, but I want to take the risk. Like I want to try, I want to give it my all. I want to do this. Um, don't be afraid to ask strangers for help,
Yes.
especially if you live in an area where we have a cute historic downtown with lots of independent, like mom and pop shops.
Mhm.
Small business owners generally love supporting other small business owners.
Yes.
In Waxahachie, where we are, there's a odd concentration of small women-owned businesses,
Hmm.
and I don't really have anybody that's in the same market as me, but I have other women that do retail. And so, whenever I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this for taxes or
Yeah.
how to label this for my expenses, like what's a write-off? I don't know. Can I write off my car? Like just all of these things to where like it depends on your state or it depends on like the federal law of that year. Those things get very overwhelming to me.
Hmm.
And again, I am very thankful that Evan can go through the weeds for me, and
Yeah.
he does do a lot of that. But if that is not like your spouse is not that way, you don't have that resource.
Hmm.
Just boil my husband down to a resource. Um,
It's okay. He probably
but
won't listen.
yeah, um, but don't be afraid to ask other people who maybe are further along in the journey for help, because more than likely they have their own experiences. Some people may love Square, some people would be like, I would never touch that with a 10-foot pole, and here's why. So just don't be afraid to ask for help,
Yeah.
even if that help is from someone you may not really know yet.
And I would even take that a step further. And I would say if there are people in your world that you know who are successful, highly respected, they
Yep.
run businesses or companies, all it takes, and this is what you say to them, and this is all it takes, like, either it's an email or a phone call. They probably would respect a phone call, but they probably have time for one. So if an email is all you can do, then great. But say,
Right.
hey, I really respect what you're doing. I have watched you and admired you for so long now, and I am trying to run a business of my own. Would you be willing to give me 15, maybe even 30 minutes of your time one day? I'll schedule a time with you that you can just help me figure out the basics of what I need to do to get started. And
Mhm.
I'm going to say that probably 98% of the people that you ask that are going to say yes. They're going to give you that time because you were respectful, you were complimentary, but you were genuine.
Right.
And no one's going to turn that down because people love to help people. So
Yeah.
they're not going to turn you down. They're not going to say, no, get away from me, you annoying person. Like you just gave
Yeah.
me the best compliment I've had probably in years. So
Right.
do that. Be bold, because if you're going to do something like this, you're going to have to be bold. You
Yeah,
have to
it's
be.
yeah, there's no one that is going to look at you and you're never going to have a product so good that someone else is going to willingly do all the legwork for you. It could
Mm-mm.
be the best product in the world, it could be the best quality, it could be the most effective. No one's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
And having to kind of put yourself out there and risk rejection and being embarrassed and I for those who don't know, tallow is one of our main products, and it's beef fat. I know we kind of alluded to it, but let me just kind of lay it out there. The amount of times that I've been at vendor markets and people will be like, "Oh my gosh, this lotion feels so great! Like, is it coconut oil? Is it shea butter?" And I'm like, "Actually, it's beef fat." You know, having people kind of look at you sideways, and you're like, "Listen, it makes sense scientifically.
It does.
Some people care, some people don't, and it's for some people, and some people it's not, and that's okay."
Okay, so this is actually a good segue, because I had a question written down that I wanted to ask you. And I don't want you to call anyone out, okay? Like I don't want I don't want this to be
Okay.
like, yeah, this so and so did this. But I mean, I feel like it's a very valid question, and probably one people will have in their own minds. And it's this: did you face resistance from people in your life? And if so, like, how did you handle that?
Honestly, no.
Awesome.
um,
I love that.
which which I feel like is kind of like, man, what can I glean from that? And what advice can I give people? No, we didn't really face a lot of resistance from like friends or family whenever we told them. I Whenever I was reading and reviewing the questions that you sent me, and I came across this one, I had to think about it, and which is just such a blessing, right? But then I was kind of like, is it just because people don't say it to my face?
How would you
Um,
know? I mean, you never
I
know.
know it's none of my business, but
Yeah.
yeah, the way that we did go about it is before we approached any of our friends or our family that we respected in the sense of we may have needed their guidance on something. We kind of had a short, still super organic. We're not walking around with um, like a PowerPoint or anything, but we kind
Yeah.
of had like a presentation and the points that we wanted to get across. And I think of the meeting that we had with my father-in-law, who is basically, I don't know his technical title, but he'll go
Uh,
to different businesses across the country, review all of their financial records, and kind of evaluate how profitable they are. And
wow.
so before we approached him, it's my father-in-law, it's my husband's dad. It's not like, "Hi, sharks, we're asking for," it was nothing that formal, but it was good practice for us to kind of be a little bit more prepared if we
Yeah.
ever wanted to approach someone who may not have the motivator of just loving us.
Right. Right.
uh, so no, we didn't face a whole lot of resistance, and even so, um, through our website and whenever we started on Etsy, we have yet to have a negative review.
That's awesome.
Again, at least to my face.
That's awesome.
um, so yeah, it's just that has been a continual affirmation, I feel like, for me, that because there will come the day where
Yeah.
people will have something to say,
Yeah.
um, but I do think that it is a bit, I'm not trying to be braggy, but it is a bit of a testament of, before you just kind of give something to the world to consume, make sure you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you've done your research. You've spent, I mean, how long do you say that you've spent like actually just researching this before the whole business like ever developed in your mind? Like I feel like that probably sprung from just years of your own personal research for yourself, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I Since I was a teenager, had hormonal issues, whether that was acne or weight gain or crazy periods that didn't show up. And I got a PCOS diagnosis whenever I was 18.
Wow.
Um, did the more traditional Western medicine route of birth control on and off through high school, after high school. Um, and it wasn't until after we got married that I realized that there just had to be another way.
Yeah.
Um, and the ideology that I held around, I've always been a big science nerd, if that gives any credit to anything. It's always been very interesting to me. But I am also very naturally a curious and very critical person.
Hmm.
Um, and therefore, it makes me a bit more thorough than most people. And if you talk to my mom, I was the why child.
Yeah.
Why is the sky blue? Why does the sun feel like that? Why do I get sunburned? Like, just information and knowledge makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of motivators intrinsically between just my own ailments and then just my natural tendencies as a person. But yeah, honestly, it's years. I was a biology major for 2 years at a very nice school nearby.
Mm-hmm.
I tutored, anatomy, biology, physiology, all of these things, in a past life. It really is a culmination of my personal experience, combing through medical inserts and spending my evenings on PubMed, just trying to understand the ins and outs of things. Where it's like, that's a crazy Friday night, Sierra. You
Nah.
seem like a pretty fun person. Um, but you know, um, it is years of just looking at things and going down rabbit holes to the point where it was probably unhealthy for a while. But again, it also was asking strangers questions, people that
Yeah.
were more knowledgeable than me. What are they going to do? They're just going to tell me no, or they're going to ignore me, and I can handle either one of those responses.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, and if anything, I either walk away going, okay, well, now I have to figure out someone else to talk to or a different book to read, or I get my question answered, and right then and there, which takes a lot less time.
Yeah. So, what's so cool to me and the way that God just has everything mapped out. And I feel like life is like a jumbled up. If you can imagine like a bunch of strings in your hand, they're all kind of like just jumbled up and messy. And you open your hand and like all the strings are touching, right? Like they all touch. And I feel like our lives are like that, that He has this string touching this one and this one touching that one, and they all touch, and we don't
Mm,
understand why, and we may never like see like why all of them touch, and then sometimes He allows us to. And what I see is that all of these years, these medical conditions that you've had, these things that you've had to battle, was God like, you think that maybe, I'm not saying you think, but like we think sometimes that when we're about to launch something new or we feel called to something, that it was just so recent, but in actuality it was something God was preparing you for like 10 years ago.
yes.
And those, all those 10 years through, like he gave you the mind of a researcher, someone who loves science, someone who likes to ask questions. That is part of who you are, because he knew that he was going to give you this calling and this passion project, because and these things that you were going to have to deal with, and yeah, they were hard, and I'm sure they are still. And that's you know, it's hard when you know that you have to face something like that, and continually figure it out. And yet that's the beautiful part of your story and your company, is that you have done all of these research all of these years, and it has prepared you for this company, and to help women and to have a ministry through your
Mm,
business, which is just so neat. I mean, I think that is just such a blessing. That is so powerful and so wonderful, Sierra. I love that.
well,
So what I want to ask you two questions, and this is kind of just like a fun thing.
yeah.
But like, what excites you the most about this? And then I also want to take it, what drains you the most about this? Because let's be real, running a business is not always like fun, right? Even if it's something you love, it's not always
Yeah.
fun. So let's talk about like, what really gets you out of bed? Like what excites you? What do you would just jump out of bed and like, yes, let's do it? And then like what kind of just makes you go, oh, I don't want to do this?
I, again, like reading over these questions, and trying to come up with things that were witty or relatable or whatever. And I was just like, okay, just off the bat, how would I answer that? And I think the ironic thing is that the thing that I absolutely love the most about the position that I have found myself in is the exact same thing that drains me the most.
Ah,
And what I absolutely love about the size of a business that we are right now, the where we are as far as we're productive and it's
mhm,
working, and but we're still in a very small phase of I get to go meet vendors. I get to go talk to customers. I get to answer the questions personally. I'm the one responding on social media,
mhm,
doing all of the inventory. I love
mhm,
one because I'm kind of controlling. I love being able to do all of that. But more so, I get to experience firsthand how people are affected by the products I produce, which is
yeah,
just a gratification that is hard for me to describe. That this one idea that I've had, has changed the daily life of someone who, one that I think about often is a little baby that had eczema, crying all the time,
mhm,
you know, always uncomfortable, always uncomfortable breastfeeding, never sleeping, like just
oh,
because they're so uncomfortable. And, while we don't have children quite yet, I can imagine just how even draining that is as a mother,
yeah,
and just that the physical, you know, tiredness of all of that, but then even just the emotional,
yeah,
how do I help my child?
right,
And, and then there's me in my kitchen that's like 100 years old listening to a silly podcast with enough beef fat, and I say, here's the answer to your problem. Being able to be invited into very intimate areas of people's lives through products that they use every day is,
yeah,
I feel like, a very intimate thing. And I feel very honored when people trust me enough to provide that. Um, that is what I love the most. The connections, the community, and then, yeah, that whole aspect that I just explained. But on the other side, that is the most draining thing because there's always people that need help.
yeah,
There's always people that have questions. There are always people that are in need of a conversation or an email back, and setting up boundaries to where
mhm,
it doesn't just completely burn me out. And I'm able to show up for the appropriate amount of people, the appropriate amount of hours for the business, without just running myself ragged to where I can't show up, in my home life or in business life.
yeah,
That has definitely been a struggle for me to try to balance
yeah,
because I feel so privileged that I'm able to do the things that I'm able to do, that I almost feel like I owe people my time.
mm,
And in a way, you do want to show up for people who are paying for your services and paying for, your products. At the end of the day, like, I'm still one person.
yeah,
And it is okay for me to go, man, like, I know that she really needs this, but I am going to freak out if I, don't take 20 minutes and eat a meal right now. Like, this
right,
can wait.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, just the community, the connections, and just the weight of the honor that I feel, being able to provide things that really do change people's like day-to-day lives. It's a very motivating factor, but it is also something I view. I don't want to say a burden, but it can be if I don't keep the appropriate boundaries on
yeah.
it.
That's weighty.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility. You've been
Mhm.
given you've been given this opportunity and it's a responsibility and you feel that. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong, I think, admitting that. And I think it's so great that you've set healthy boundaries. Have you found it hard to really identify what those boundaries should look like?
Yes, because personally, this is just my opinion. I think people generally are looking for boundaries, and put boundaries in place for the means of comfort. And while I don't think that's a bad thing, we're not called to be comfortable all the time.
Amen. Amen.
And so it's that, okay, well, I know that for me, it's really good for me to make sure that my phone and I'm off of my social media, at least my business social media, by like 8 o'clock at night. But if I, happen to see someone who I had one person message me kind of late and I just happened to see it and their daughter had gotten into an ant bed and
Oh,
was covered in ant bites and all of this inflammation and all of these things. And so in that moment, I knew that technically my boundary was I'm not on my phone at 8 p.m. Um, but it is still my decision in that moment to, okay, this may be inconvenient. It violates my own boundary that I set, but is it still the right thing to do in that moment? In my opinion, yes.
yeah.
And so I think whenever you're placing boundaries, um, there are some where it's like a hard and fast no, and that's the right thing. And then there's some where I feel like the rhythm and the pattern should be here's this boundary, but you also have that flexibility to, if someone is in your inbox and their 2-year-old fell in an ant bed, you answer them,
Mm,
you know.
yeah.
Um, so I do find that difficult, and that is a spot, as my therapist would say, that is an opportunity for growth for me.
Oh, don't we love those therapist
Yep,
terms?
yep,
It's all how you reframe the question, right? Or how you frame the thought. There's a
right,
whole study on that.
yeah,
Yeah, and that I think that goes back to also it's just like the tugging of the Holy Spirit. Like, right, like
yeah,
yes, I have boundaries in my business and I have boundaries as an individual, and yet if you feel like God's saying help this person, well, that's a responsibility of you as a daughter of Christ. I mean, that's
yes,
just what you do. So I
right,
mean, and I'm sure a lot of like prayer goes into that and like just trying to understand who you are and you know who you are and you know what's healthy for you and you know what's not. And it's different for everybody. And so everyone's going to have something different set in
mhm,
place for them. And I think that's just such a good reminder to have boundaries in your work, in your business life that keep you mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, physically healthy. Because if we're empty, we can't fill anyone up at all.
yep,
And that was something
absolutely,
God reminded me of not that long ago.
yeah,
It's so easy. It's so easy to like empty yourself.
yeah,
And I know you have a mother's heart. And
mhm,
so I know you do the same thing. And I know that I don't know you like super well, Sierra, and that it's always been like this like distant
yeah,
Facebook like
it's true.
friendship thing that I just kind of like I latched on to like your posts and the things you said and I was like, I love this girl. She's amazing.
No,
And so
I don't think
and tell me how old you are, Sarah.
I'm 27.
27. Okay, everybody. She's 27 years old. She is just that, and that's what's so inspiring to me is we need and I was this is a really weird segue and we're just gonna follow it. Maybe it's what God wants, but I was Gateway Church, which is based out of South Lake, but they have like at least seven
Mhm,
campuses, you know, Robert Morris and all that kind
mhm,
of thing. And
mhm,
they did a presbytery from Sunday night to through Wednesday night. And presbytery service, if you don't know what it is, I'm not going to explain it well because I'm just now learned about it. But it's basically they bring in people with the gift of prophecy and they speak an edifying, encouraging, or prophetic word over the congregation. And they will like see people God has told them to speak to. It's amazing. And like I've been watching the services, they would play them back and post them on YouTube. So you can find them if you go to Gateway Church and search presbytery. But
mhm,
anyway, they were talking the last service was all about like the next generation and how people 40 and under and what God is going to be doing through them and like just praying over that generation and praying over the rising up of the youth and how there is going to be a revival, there is going to be a movement, there is a fire that God's putting in the hearts of the youth. And
Mhm.
even though I don't feel like youth, I'm definitely 40 and under, so I
Right.
can classify as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so I just see that in you, in that you have this fire in you, you have this way of seeing life and wording things that is edifying, that is encouraging, that is uplifting, and that allows people to put themselves in what your story. So I just
Mhm.
think that's really neat, and that's mainly why, like, I follow you because of the things you say on
Well,
Facebook.
thank
It's just so inspirational. Do you do you find it difficult to be, I know technically, I mean, I know you're just kind of starting out in this. A business is young when it's like under 5 years, I think.
I agree.
Do you, yeah. I
For
mean,
sure.
do you find it difficult being public, like being seen publicly, opening yourself up in that way, or do you have this sense of like, failing publicly if something was to, happen that, not that your business would fail, but if anything just kind of, I don't know. It's is it hard to have like that public figure mentality and to allow yourself to be vulnerable to an ever widening scope of people, because the more that your business spreads, the more that people are going to start following you, and that's just organically, naturally going to happen.
Mhm. It was not something that I anticipated. Um, Whenever we first started out, that was not an area of growth and specifically like recognition that
Mm,
I was like, oh, well, people are going to recognize me whenever I go to the coffee shop from my stories that I post on the business. And I remember the first time that it happened, Sam, I literally hadn't showered in 4 days. And I I don't remember what it was, but I was just like, I don't even drink coffee. I'm going to go to this coffee shop in our small town where my sister was working at the time. And, like I have friends that work there. I don't care if they see me in that way.
yeah.
But I was sitting there waiting for my coffee because I was like, I gotta get in and out of here. I do not want anybody to see me in this state. And the girl behind me, the coffee shop is very small, and the girl
Yeah.
behind me, I could tell from my peripheral was like getting closer to me, and I was just kind of, what is going on? Like 6 foot COVID distance. Like, what are we doing? And but I kind of like turned around, to smile at her and make sure like I wasn't like in her way or whatever. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, are you even eating?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Oh
yes,
man.
hi." And then I was kind of like, "How do you recognize me in this state? What does that say about me?"
That is amazing.
And that was kind of the first realization that I had, where I was like, "Oh, our town is small enough."
Mhm.
Um, and just through networking and building those mutual business connections,
Yeah.
you start to know a lot of people,
Mhm.
and people start to know you, even if you don't
Yes.
know them.
Yes.
And I've been very open about our infertility
Mhm.
journey and just how that has affected me as a person, as a woman, affects my marriage, and um, whenever I'm in the middle of trying to have a vendor market sale, and someone goes, well, how's your menstrual cycle? And you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea who you are.
Oh man.
Um,
Whoa.
I'm like, and I understand it because there's people that I watch online that I feel like I kind of know them.
Yeah.
And but if they were to meet me, they'd be like, "Hi, who are you?" And I just don't feel like we are such a quote unquote a big deal that is
Mhm.
something that I would ever encounter. Um, and so there is a part of me that does feel like I have to present a certain way
Yeah.
whenever we're going downtown, or whenever I go to the grocery store, or whenever we go to vendor markets. And of course, you want to look professional whenever
Yeah.
you're on the job. Um, but I actively have to kind of fight against, one of the things that I believe as a person is that obviously social media isn't all real all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and being vulnerable and showing people that it's okay to not be on all the time. My hair is in a messy bun 90% of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just my reality. But that is also not defining of who I am. Um, so that is something that I actively have to work against my own brain. But as
Yeah.
far as being afraid to fail, I think failing is very subjective.
Yeah.
Um, some
Good
people,
answer.
yeah, I think very politically correct.
No, I love that answer. It's a good
Um,
answer.
but I think it is subjective because I would say, oh my gosh, our numbers in comparison to like our sales around Christmas, very busy season, everybody's buying everything. If I compare June to December, I would be like, oh my gosh, June's a failure.
Mm.
But it's way more than, sales and how you do at one market. Everything is a lot bigger than just what I feel like I may have failed at in that moment. Um, and as someone who's been doing independent contracting, again, just that cosmetology, worked at many different salons, did my own thing, there's always going to be another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So even if like you start the business and it fails, start another one, do it
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yeah.
try in a different area, market it in a different way. Um, that would be my encouragement, just because failing is such a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, this is my dog.
Hi, Pepper.
Um,
So cute.
that failing can be a stepping stone because everything is a learning curve. And I am just
Yeah.
convinced that everybody is faking it until they make it.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't have that fear of failure just because the perspective that I've had on it has changed.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one thing to remember, like if you are listening and that you're trying to start an endeavor, is there's no two people whose lives are the same.
Nope.
So it's like, while someone could have an opinion on if what I'm doing is failing or not, they do not live the life that I live. They do not bring the baggage that I have. They don't have the skills that I have. Um, you can't compare apples to oranges. And
Amen. Oh, yes. That is so
I,
good.
so someone could say, "Oh, well, I think you're failing," and it's like, "Well, from your perspective, you're allowed to think that." I disagree. Um,
I vehemently disagree with that statement.
right. Well, thank you for the input.
Have a nice
Your
day.
limited knowledge. I appreciate that random comment on a reel, but we
Yeah.
move on, and it'll be okay.
As a true mom who has kids who watch Bluey and who also loves Bluey herself, run your own race. Just run your
Nice.
own race.
Yeah.
And comparison is the thief of joy. I will say all of the trite
Yep.
phrases, but they're so true because
They are.
comparison it does nothing. It does absolutely nothing unless you are looking at another business to learn,
Mm-hmm.
to to understand so that you
Yeah.
can grow, then there is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely zero point. And it goes across the board. If you're comparing looks, comparing lives, comparing cars, I don't care what you're comparing. It doesn't matter because just like you said, we're all living our own lives. We're all doing our best. We're all following the journey that God has given us. And it is never going to look the same. Even if you were two people in the same industry, it's going to look vastly different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a good word. That is a good word right there. So, I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of these questions. I'm just looking over the questions I had. Are there, like, if you could, this is a fun one. If you could leverage an aspect of your business, like say you had the resources, like the financial resources, because leverage costs money. Like
Yep.
if you could leverage something, what would that be?
The less serious one is I would hire someone to wash all of the dishes that get covered in beef fat,
Yes.
wash them all. I would pay someone good money to come scrape tallow and beef off of my floors, off of my countertops, out of my dishes. Um, that's kind of the silly one.
Mm.
more long-term professional answer that is more applicable widely, um, social media for sure.
Yes, I was hoping you would say that one because that's the one I would pick.
Yes. And social media is such a beast in the sense
Mm,
of it's constantly changing. The
yeah.
algorithm is constantly changing. So, kind of when you get in a groove, that's when the grooves change.
Mm,
Um, and as someone who desires to have content that is not just noise,
yeah.
um, making content that is applicable and quality, whether that is just like from a heart perspective,
Yeah.
or it's educational,
Yeah.
those things take a lot of time.
Yes, they do.
And the life of an Instagram post is like 24, maybe 48 hours.
Yeah.
And so just feeling like a slave to the machine,
Yeah.
um, is very difficult. And so if I could outsource anything, if someone could have all the stuff that's in my brain and just write it for me, I can't pay them good money to do that.
Yeah. Social
Um,
media is tough, man. Like, and I personally, I have find it so difficult and so draining. And honestly, I know there's rules around it. I know it's like, this is what you should do. This is how it should look. You should post 3 times a day and it should be a business post, a personal post, or something, something engaging. And it's like, there's all these rules and there's all these classes. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And there are there are things that are way more important, and there's best use of my time and there's use of my time, and I am not about to spend all of these hours on social media. And so, I mean, am I wrong in thinking that the old fashioned way of networking still
mhm,
works? I mean, if you're going out and you're talking to businesses, you're doing a vendor event, you're networking, you're meeting people, you're promoting your business. Belly to belly is what people say, is there, you're going out and you're talking to those people. You're not just relying on the social media, and that's an aspect of it.
mhm.
You're also like really engaging with people on another level. Is that still enough? Is that still effective?
Gosh, that's the question that I was even talking to my husband about last night because, it's one thing to be like, okay, I have to make a post a day, but
Mm,
now it's a post and a reel and some stories. And then it's a post and a reel and some stories, but then you have to use this audio if you want your reel to even take off. And then it's a post, a reel, some stories, a reel with good audio, and then you have to post it at this time. And
mm-mm.
man, like we had our first like viral reel a few weeks ago, and it got like 25,000, 26,000
Wow.
views. And man, that felt so good. And then it was just as fleeting to be like, well, now we're irrelevant again.
Mm,
And I will say again, like if you're asking if it's enough, I, honestly, like I think it just kind of depends on what the goal is.
mm,
Um, because I would absolutely love for us to be doing so many online sales that I can just move to the middle of nowhere where no one can find me. I can have a dairy cow and some chickens, and I can go out in the sun with minimal clothing and not offend any neighbors.
and it won't get
I
above 80.
won't get above 80. There will be no mosquitoes. It's basically heaven.
Hashtag
Um,
introvert dream life.
yeah, introvert. Give me a dairy cow. Give me a few kids. I'll be fine.
Heck yes.
But so for us, I feel like social media is relevant and important, and trying to balance that. But if our goal was to stay in the town that we're in the house that we're in, I do think that my time would be better spent doing more of that belly to belly conversation and meetings, and kind of expanding to we're a town outside of Dallas, so even going to bigger cities,
Yeah.
Dallas, Arlington, Fort Worth, because there is no replacement for in-person networking.
Yeah.
I think that is still more important. Those connections in that community is more important. But that day to day grind on just trying to stay relevant and get followers and make connections that way for our goals, I don't see a way to avoid it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think, and from my background and my experience, I came from the real estate world, and I was
Yeah.
not an, I had my license. I was not an agent. I was on the like ops and admin and executive assistant, all that kind of stuff. And and I know the social media, like, you can batch create, so you can have like a day on your calendar where that's all you do, and you block off that entire day to social media, and then you have all your posts ready for a week, and you can just crank them out, right? And like, you don't have to like go in and create them in that moment, and that helps. Like, there's
Mhm.
systems around every aspect of a business. If you have a system for every aspect of your business, that's probably an episode all in of itself, because we definitely don't have time to go into all that today. But there are certainly ways that you can create organization out of the chaos. And as long as I feel like, and I'm no business expert, but I feel like if you're showing up and maybe your social media isn't hitting all the marks, but you're still showing up and you're still posting, I dare say, 3 to 4 times a week,
Mhm.
or at least once a day, or just somewhere in there. Like, if you're hitting that and you're consistent in how you show up, I think the algorithm still likes that, at least if you're consistent
Yeah.
when you do it.
Mhm.
Because that's just impossible. I don't think anyone could hit
Yeah.
that on their own. That's crazy. I didn't realize it had gotten so
Yes.
ridiculous. I just think that's ridiculous. I am not a
It
big
is.
social media is like a necessary evil in my mind, and I know it's like part of our lives now and we can't get rid of it, but man, I just
If you
ugh.
didn't have the business, I'd be off of it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely taken breaks from it and loved it, but now I don't feel like I can anymore. So I feel like one of the last questions I really want to ask you, and you kind of talked about this when you set boundaries. However, I really want to zero in on a certain aspect of it, is when you run a business, it's really hard, and especially for you, since your business is out of your home and you're
Mhm.
doing all of the creating yourself, you're making all the products. How do you walk away from it? Like, how, when it's there, it's in your kitchen, you said there's tallow all over your floors, there's tallow on your dishes, maybe your sink is full, maybe you have stuff everywhere, labels on the floor, like there's, I don't know, but
Yeah.
how do you separate that? Because as a business over, and I've being there myself, like, you are always thinking, you're always innovating, you're always like, your mind is on the business, and that's got to be so hard. And how do you create a healthy space for yourself, especially when it lives in your own house?
Yeah.
Let's walk through that a little bit, and what kind of advice can you offer on that?
Um, that is a good question, and it is something that I feel like I am still kind of muddling through,
Mhm.
because it's not one of those things where I can go in our guest room and that be my office and I can shut the door, and then whenever I leave, like, I'm in my kitchen. So if
Yeah.
there's dishes from dinner the night before, I can't exactly manufacture skincare for people when I've got leftover spaghetti in my sink. Like, that,
Yeah.
one, is disgusting, and
Yep.
two, is in the way. Um, so it's definitely a conversation of give and take between Evan and I, because he very much values and respects that I'm here all the time, and I am extroverted, contrary to popular belief. So being confined here, whether that's because I need to do laundry or because I need to process beef fat, like, um, it's hard to separate those two.
Yeah.
Something that I've been doing recently is I will literally just leave. There will be a day where I'll take maybe the first or second half of the day, and I'll make sure I have something intentional planned, like with a friend,
Yeah.
and not a friend that I feel like just kind of drains me a little bit, but like I have a friend that we basically call each other coworkers. She owns another small business, and so she's also home all the time. And so on the days where we need to do admin stuff and we're not trying to spend money, we'll go to one of each other's houses and we'll do admin stuff in the living room.
Yeah.
And um, that honestly has been it's been a very big game changer for my mental health. It's just
Yeah.
having someone there. You don't even have to be talking, but having someone there. But then also having hobbies that you don't monetize.
Yes.
Um, is also a big thing, especially if you are kind of in that mindset and that's just kind of a natural bent for you is, well, I'm really good at this. How can I make money from it? Because we're just here. Finding things that you also enjoy just because you enjoy them. Um, and for me, I do try to find those things out of the house.
Yeah.
And and then I do regularly have, we call them touch point meetings with Evan if I find myself feeling any sort of resentful or drained, or I just walk into the house and I'm like, I literally want to be anywhere but here because I'm
Mhm.
here all the time. The responsibility of like kind of the homekeeping aspects of my position right now, or the aspects of I look at our product shelf and I need to do and make these products, and that is the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, so if someone has the ability to have a physical separate room, 100% do that.
Do it. Mm-hmm.
um, if you don't do that and you don't have that ability, girl, leave your house,
Yeah.
go touch grass, go get coffee in another town at a cute aesthetic place if that
Mm-hmm.
is what brings joy in that moment. Because it's really hard whenever you don't have that set aside, like PTO. Like,
Yeah.
whenever you're on that PTO, your mind is turned off from work. You're not worried about it. You're not checking email. Um, but as a business owner, you have that responsibility all the time. There's not someone to hand that off to. And so making sure that, yeah, you have hobbies that you aren't monetizing. If you can have a separate space, then do it. Um, but otherwise, I think just how there are cons of working a corporate job, that is just kind of the nature of the beast. And it is a con of working and running a business out of your house, is it's just always there.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's that phrase where it's like, you know, choice A is hard and choice B is hard, but like choose your heart.
Choose your heart.
And I would much rather have to kind of deal with the mental gymnastics of setting up boundaries, whether that be physical or mental, um, than going back to working a corporate 9 to 5 that just was not fulfilling me in any way.
Yeah. I think
So,
you touched on something that I've actually spoken on in one of my first episodes was the importance of having community
mhm,
and how having at least one person that you can go to or work with in this situation which we're talking about is that you have that one person that you can just even if you're not like talking you're working with them there's something about having a presence of someone else like for me it's my mom like if
yeah,
even if she's just there it's like that's all I need. I don't need you to talk to me. I just need you just like right there. Your presence is calming
yeah,
and it's wonderful and I just need you here. And
yeah,
obviously we'll talk. It's not like I'm just going to be
right.
silent around my mom, but I mean it's just that presence and that's so helpful and because your environment if you're working in a chaotic or a negative environment, it has an impact on you.
Yeah,
And I've also done the thing where I've gone to a coffee shop. It's like, honey, like Saturday, can I go to a coffee shop and work so that I can focus so that I'm not having to worry about the kids coming in and interrupting me? Because we have an office, but when your kids are like banging or crying on the other
yeah,
side of the door, do you really think that's effective? No, it's not effective. It doesn't
right,
help me at all. So yeah, it's important to get out of the house, to find a space where you can focus, put headphones in and just listen to white noise or music or whatever is your jam. And sometimes I listen to comedians. It's
yeah.
I like to
Or a
laugh.
podcast.
Or a podcast. Or a
Yeah,
podcast.
or a podcast.
This
Yeah,
podcast would be great.
right,
Um, self promotion. Sorry
right.
about that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I also wanted to highlight one last thing that you just released about your business, and it's so cool, and I'm so excited about this.
Mhm.
Please tell me, and what was the name of it again? Because I've already forgotten.
So,
What was the title?
so no, personal product guides, and then I've opened up just some times for consultations. Would you like me to explain that?
Yes, please. I would
Okay.
love our listeners to hear about this because it's so cool.
Yeah, so one of the things about our branding and about me is that the quality of ingredients in your personal care products is very important.
Mhm.
But if you turn over your foundation or your cleanser that you got from Target, there's probably anywhere from 10 to 30 ingredients that are 15 letters long. Um, Not that some of them are okay and some of them aren't. It's just hard to navigate all of the greenwash marketing and find products that maybe are a little bit cleaner and
Mhm.
biologically appropriate,
Yeah.
um, and not kind of get lost in the weeds. So you don't want to be paying $80 for a cleanser that's like, oh, it's clean, it's hormone friendly, it's vegan, and whatever, and then you get home and either A, it doesn't work, or B, you kind of got sucked into some marketing that someone got paid millions of dollars to do.
Yeah.
And so the personal product guides, I have the opportunity to look at your current lineup, whether that's makeup or skincare,
Mhm.
and I will take those products and I'll break them down for you. The things that may be questionable, obviously, it's your decision. If you go, man, this foundation is so good that I don't care if it has
Mhm.
this perfume in it or whatever, that's
Mhm.
totally your prerogative. Our big thing is we want people to be informed about
Yeah.
what they're doing just so you can make the best decision for you. And so this guide will have the broken down products. I'll have my top 5 to 10 ingredients that are easy to remember. So,
Mhm.
like if you're shopping in Target or at Walmart and you need to grab a quick sunscreen, you're like, okay, I know I'm probably not going to be able to get the best, cleanest, non toxic, whatever here, but what do I need to avoid based on my priorities? And you're like, okay, well, I remember from this product guide, this was something that was deemed very toxic or
That's
important or
awesome.
whatever.
That's awesome.
So it is not only like a personal guide to help you with your products that you currently own, it's also empowering you to make better decisions whenever you're at the grocery store in a very casual, low pressure way to where you're able to make the decision and an informed decision on what products to bring into your home, into your routine, to use on your family. So it's helpful for the things that you currently use, but also hopefully gives you some wisdom and some guidance on for purchases later down the road. The consultations are Zoom meetings like this. So if you
Yeah.
have more in-depth questions where you're like, I have never worn makeup in my life, what do I do? Kind of pulling on my old makeup artist heartstrings of just the application of it all. But then also, if someone has more complex skin needs to where they have maybe specific allergies or they're on different types of medication, it just gives me the opportunity to ask more questions
Yeah.
so I can provide better and more personal recommendations, if that makes sense.
That's
Yeah.
awesome and so empowering. That is so, because I know for me, I'm just like, yes, please. That's because it's overwhelming. And even like if you're just doing casual research, if you're trying to do casual research on 30 ingredients, no one has time
Yep.
for that. No one
Nope.
wants to do that. And you already have the knowledge. So you're just
Yeah.
like, let me do this for you, one and done, I'm good. Like, and then in the future, if you find on something else. I meant to ask you this earlier, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I see this all the time, and you're going to probably roll your eyes when I ask this, but like, Il Maquillage. I see it everywhere. It's advertised all over the place. That foundation that's magical and it matches everyone. It looks amazing. I'm like, okay, but there's got to be something wrong with it because it's nothing is perfect. Have you seen that? Have you had any experience with it?
I'm gonna be honest. I have not heard of that.
You haven't
Um,
heard about Il Maquillage? It's all over the place.
no, maybe the algorithm just got you. I don't know.
Ah.
No, any a lot of foundations. The concern typically is with preservatives, formaldehyde,
Mm,
um, and things that basically make them last a long time,
yeah.
or their pigments. Another thing is kind of their it'll be labeled as fragrance or perfume. That I'll just do this is free. Fragrance and perfume is a kind of a trademark loophole that's legal somehow to where it's like, well, I don't want to give my recipe, my chemical cocktail recipe, so
Mm,
this other company can take it. So instead of saying we use these ingredients in this, we say we use fragrance. So it's in there and the customer knows that there's fragrance in there, but so Target can't steal from Walmart's formula. It can be a mixture of literally hundreds of different things that you're just not privy to as a consumer, and they don't have to give it to you, even if you ask.
Whoa, that's
Um,
unreal.
yeah. And so I'm like, is this, what are we living in? Is this,
It's messed up, man.
um, so yeah, and there's a lot of things like that. And so going and having a product guide to go, okay, well, I always read that people say that this is bad, but like, why?
Yeah.
Um, understanding understanding it may make you go, oh, okay, well, that's actually important to me. Instead of, some random girl on Instagram says, this is bad. And you're like, oh, okay, but why? Why is
Yeah.
it bad?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's just kind of an insight into why those things may be helpful for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. So before we wrap up, I have two things. I
Okay.
want to know what is on the horizon for you.
Yeah.
Like what do you see coming? What do you hope to have coming that you maybe you're praying for, or you're considering, if you want to share.
Yeah.
And two, give our audience some of the products that you already have out. You know, we talked about the tallow
Mhm.
whip moisturizer, and by the way, I've used it. I loved it. My skin was so dry. Like I
Mhm.
was rubbing. You're probably gonna hate this. I was rubbing Pond's all over my skin, all over my face, and it was just. And it would just be gone. Like it
Mhm.
was like I was never putting anything on. And I finally just resorted to like olive oil,
Yeah.
and but I tried your tallow whip and it fixed it. It was perfect, and I love it so much. So that stuff is gold. But yeah, what are some of the other products that you currently have, and then what is on the horizon for y'all?
So the products that we currently have, we do have two tallow whips. The first product that we came out with was Eve. So she's our original girl.
Yeah.
That's a tallow whip that has olive oil. It's been infused with lavender, chamomile, and rose hips. And then our second tallow whip that was marketed towards men, but I feel like women have just kind of eaten it up.
We just take it all.
Yeah, yeah. It's called Adam, and it's the whip that my husband actually formulated
That's so
with
cool.
cinnamon, frankincense, and cedarwood. And I understand why it's kind of our best seller. It smells like a Cinnabon. I
Oh,
absolutely love it.
sounds amazing.
It's great for beard health, which is why we kind of market it towards men. But
Cool.
you know, and then the other two, I guess, categories that we have online is we have beeswax and tallow candles.
Mm.
The great thing about those is beeswax actually cleans your air as it burns.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, in comparison to like a paraffin wax or anything that you're going to find at Bath and Body Works or TJ Maxx, um, that is just again kind of a chemical cancer cocktail.
Mm.
Uh, Beeswax allows for the air to actually be purified as it burns, and then the tallow gives you a long burn time because it has a high smoke point, and so you just get this really good quality candle. We have two, and then I just released three cleansing oils.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, that was about a month ago, and they have also done super well. So we have a normal to sensitive, um, and then a oily and acne, and then a normal to dry.
Okay.
Um, and those are all again just herbally infused oils. Um, that's kind of the lineup that we have. If you see us in person, we have different teas. We just can't ship those because of cottage law. But yeah, you can find all of those things on our website. Which can I give the plug?
Yes, do it.
Okay. So you can find our website at www.evenedentexas.tx.com, or you can follow us on Instagram and find us that way. That's going to be at Eve underscore and underscore Eden TX. And that's where you can, if you have questions, where you can get in touch with me. And obviously, I'm the person that answers you. As we've already established, I have not hired anyone else. And on the horizon for us, one of the things that we have done in the last year and a half is an event called Table Talk. Have you seen anything about that?
I have. I've seen those and I've been very curious. Yes, what is that?
Yeah, so Table Talk is a community ticketed event that I started because within our smaller town, there's actually quite a few holistic specialists. You just wouldn't think that. And
Yeah.
when I think I need someone who is more niche and who is more functional or holistic minded, I would think, oh my gosh, I need to go to Dallas. I need to go
Mhm.
to this more big city area. Um, but you don't. They're actually here. And so Table Talk is giving those providers an opportunity to connect with their community.
That's awesome.
And so a lot of the Table Talks so far, the two that we've had, have been providers and different people who provide, like, I have a sourdough friend. I have a friend who does pelvic floor PT. And so it's just a opportunity to network for those sorts of providers, but then also just people from the community getting to get to know each other
Mhm.
and find people who are like-minded in that way. Our first one was last spring, and it was kind of this introductory hello, we exist. And our friend who makes our candles for us gave us a whole spiel on beeswax and bees, and we made perfume. And then the table talk that we had in November, um, I actually taught a class on just foundational wellness with a friend of mine, and it was just more lecture type. But girl, I cooked for 70 people.
Whoa.
Yep.
Oh my.
I will be outsourcing that next time.
Now that is leverage you should invest
Yeah,
in.
yes, that is worth it to me. But we have our next table talk coming up, and it'll be here before we know it in the fall. So
Oh,
I'm pretty
wow.
excited for that.
So they can reach out to you for information on that as well. Are you going to be posting like some advertisements on that soon?
Yes, I'm working out details. I was planning to have one in the spring, but it gets too hot too quick, and no one wants to do anything in 105.
Mm-mm.
So we're gonna kind of scratch that, and then we're gonna focus on doing one for the fall.
Awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Well, that's something to look forward to. Maybe I'll be able to make the fall one. That'll be on
yeah,
my bucket list.
yeah, for
Awesome.
sure.
Sierra, thank you so much for joining me today for being willing to taking time out of your schedule. I know we're all busy, and so it's just been such a pleasure having you on. I feel like I could ask you like 50 more questions and probably pick your brain even longer, but I'm just so thankful for you today, and we'll be linking all of the information that Sarah listed in the comments, I'm sorry, in the description of this video, all of her contact information, her website link, her Instagram. Please go check her out. Go look at her products. They're amazing. She has an amazing story. Go follow her. You'll be glad you did. Any last words before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yes, thank you, Sierra. Everyone, I hope you all have a blessed week, and we will be talking to you again very, very soon.